that bulky. We don't do birthdays. I'm sure there's some law that protects that.
Rights to privacy. Personal data.
I know, it's kind of weird, isn't it?
Good morning, and we'll call the Cook County Board of Commissioners to order on this August 21st, 2018, where we are supporting the community through quality public service. Please rise for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any adjustments to the agenda?
Madam Chair, I have one request from Pat Strand to approve her 2018 Veteran Service grant. It's a standard grant, $7,500 that she's received for the last many years. So, handed out the request and it'll be approved by resolution. I suggested adding it to the consent agenda since there's nothing changed at all in the request.
Okay. Any other adjustments to the agenda? A motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, we have a public comment period. However, we do not have anyone in the audience for that, so we will move on to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Support.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, Molly arrived just in time.
Oh, am I up? So I submitted for the board's consideration two separate agreements concerning two separate entities. One, password. One being the Maple Hill Fire Department and a land lease for their fire hall, and the other being Arrowhead Electric Cooperative, or Arrowhead Cooperative, I guess is their new, what they go by now, and that is for utility easements. So I'm asking the board to approve these, but they will not be executed until we actually own the land underneath. You know, that's concerns these agreements. This is in preparation for the land exchange. There is no date set for the closing, but it's closer than it's ever been, and we want to make sure that we have all the agreements protecting third-party interests in place or approved by the board, ready to sign once we go to closing, so it's not delayed any further by our own delay. So,
For both of them?
what's that?
For both of these?
Yeah, both of them. So I'd ask that the board approve them in substantially the same form that is attached. You have drafts there. Any changes would be minor. I'll bring them back as a consent agenda item once we have dates, effective dates essentially for them. These are the first 2 of 7 total agreements that I'm working on to protect the third-party land interests in the land exchange properties. Happy to answer any questions.
And would you want these approved separately or as a whole?
They should each have their own separate motion.
Okay.
So sorry.
Go ahead.
Just that Joseph Pandy is highlighted, so
Right, because I don't, Joseph Pandy is no longer the CEO, I think. He was when I drafted these initially, but
But it does say Oric's successor.
yeah.
Yeah.
it does. I'm hoping to have a name to put in there. I didn't have a chance to call them and see if if that position has been replaced.
I don't believe so.
Okay, we'll open this up for discussion, questions, comments, starting with Commissioner Severson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Had a question about that name as well, but I don't have any other questions. Makes sense to be on top of this.
Commissioner Bershon?
No questions.
No questions.
No questions.
Okay, so the first one then would be to authorize the utility easement in the Arrowhead Cooperative. User condition, under the conditions of the attached draft, for the lands described effective as of the date of closing of the land exchange.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, then we'll move on to the second request, the ground lease. So there's land up there under, or in the Maple Hill Volunteer Fire Department.
Right, they have their fire hall on what's currently federal land under a special use permit. When it exchanges to the county, we will, what I'm asking the board to do is approve a land lease so that they can continue to have their fire hall on it. Right now, the special use permit was a 20-year permit expiring at whatever date I have, that it matches the corresponding expiration date on that land lease. But of course, it can be renewed, and we'll try to keep accurate records so that we know when it should be renewed. But I didn't want to make it any longer than the initial 20-year period, at least to start.
I'll make a motion to authorize execution of ground lease to Maple Hill Volunteer Fire Department under the conditions in the attached draft for lands described effective as of the date of closing of the land exchange.
Support.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There we are. So just a question, Molly, it seems like the land exchange covers a lot of area from, is this the Boundary Waters land exchange?
Yep,
Yep.
it's the very same one
Okay.
that we've been working on for 20-plus years.
20+ years.
We did have an effective closing date of December 31st, 2015.
We did at one point.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, every year, it seems like there is one, but the last barrier that was in place for the land exchange was review by general counsel for the U.S. Forest Service, and that review is complete, so it seems closer than it's ever been, but I'm not making any promises.
Well, this is at least a couple of good moves.
Yeah, yep.
So appreciate that on your part, for sure. Okay, so we will move on to Brady.
For the general fund budget review, I handed out a little packet, and we'll go through one by one. So this is a no action item today. This is just the first review of the general fund, and then an overall of what we've got for all of the funds. And we'll look at, I mean, you may want to schedule, based on this, and your other readings, you may want to schedule time with some particular departments to answer some particular questions, some of the reasoning, and to understand their needs. But the major summaries, we'll start with the first page, is personnel change requests for next year. And that should be the first sheet that you see. The first item is one that's in the budget because it was planned for earlier. It was an assistant, it was going to be that shared position with the YMCA, and then 1,040 hours, half-time position to help Brian with general maintenance. And that request is going to be withdrawn, and so that'll be a deduction, as far as I understand, to date.
So what we had previously authorized in 2017 was a full-time person at the YMCA and an 8-hour part-time person at the YMCA. And then sometime in early 2017, we were having difficulty filling that part-time position. So the board authorized a second full-time position. And what we're doing is we're giving that second full-time position back And a couple of meetings ago, we authorized the maintenance custodial position for the YMCA to fill the one full-time position. And we're going to continue to work with that part-time position to fill the other 8 hours. So we're going back to what we had in 2017 and prior, in having one full-time person and 8 hours assigned to the YMCA cleaning. So that means that we're technically taking a half of an FTE off the books.
Yeah, in both of those entities. So that one is planned to be reduced. The rest of them are to be discussed and decided on. So the second one is a technician in the IT department. This is Rena Rogers' request. That's for a full-time technician position. She describes that in the book. Does everybody have their book?
I have a car.
So anyway,
This is closer than mine.
yeah, I don't know if you want to read it all here, but she explains the number of devices and users supported by MIS has increased dramatically over the last 4 years. In 4 years, we've increased the number of end-user workstations and mobile computers from 68 to 105. So there's new people, but then there's new uses. So everybody's got a workstation, but then some are, as they travel more, they need a laptop, or some of them need handhelds as they go out in the field. And so all of these are supported. And so you can see the increase in the support, and it's the same personnel. So she said also this would provide some options for 24/7 service coverage we don't have right now. IT is always on call, even on vacation. We have numerous actions to reduce after hours without increasing staff. There will always be after-hour issues that require staff response. Current staffing means they must always be available. So, and this is under Department 60. And then her third is it frees up time for more SharePoint web development and improve the way all services are delivered. Increased emphasis on mobile work solutions will add more devices and support requirements over the next few years. So that's just saying that's the trend, that's where we're headed, so.
And as Brady mentioned previously, we're just going to present the summary of everybody's request to this date, and the items below here, which are the addition of hours, have not been approved at this level. And this may be the point in time when we say, okay, at our next meeting, we'd like to have Rena come and present and discuss this with us specifically. Today, we just wanted to give an overview of where we're at based on the raw requests for all of the budgets.
And none of these have offset funding.
No, the other human services, you'll hear more about that next week. And that one's complicated, and there may be some offset always to those, but.
That's why I asked, because sometimes when we add
Yeah.
hours, we get more. Okay, thanks, Brady.
So then the next is a small one, that's the HR specialist adding 5 hours a week, and Jeff can comment on that.
Truthfully, Judy's been working 35 hours instead of 30 hours a week, in much the same way that Becky has been working beyond her scheduled 30 hours just to handle the volume of work going through there. So, so this is just recognizing the additional 5 hours a week as being part of the budget.
And the next item is the VSO. So everything on the left, those are department numbers if you wanted to open your book. So it's Department 120. This request has been in here for a few years. We haven't approved it. It's Pat Strand working 20 hours in VSO and 20 hours in Human Services. She thinks it requires an additional 15 hours to fulfill her requirements of the position. She writes extensively on it in the book. If you look under 120, it's about 2.5 pages. I won't read all of that. So I think you've heard it in the past. So if you want to hear her explain it, that would be something to do at another meeting too. So
next item is the jailer position, and when we worked through this with Pat, he said this, basically the justification is the same as Judy and the same as Becky. He says this is what we're actually working and what we need in order to, for the staff over here, for court days and for the jailer position. This is what we're actually using and needing, and it's just reflecting that, the extra 520 hours to what we had budgeted. Next item is the EMS assistant position. You won't find anything in your book, but it speaks to what, the fact that there's nothing in the book speaks to what Valerie says about this. So the Office of Emergency Management and Public Information is extremely busy, and the workload is that of 2 FTEs being performed by 1 person. More often than not, the director takes work home in the evening and works weekends to keep up and not neglect the requirements of the emergency management side of the department. The addition of all county communications work for the board and for departments, and the PIO role takes a significant amount of time and is deadline-driven, meaning critical emergency management work gets pushed aside. An assistant is needed to help manage the daily communications products, communications plans, addressing in the E911 system, sign production for E911, along with the administrative assistance. So she's asking for a half-time position.
Brady, can I just ask
Yeah.
you a question, going back up to the jailer?
Sure.
I just need clarification. So 5 hours a week is 5 times 52, right?
Oh,
Right? So it'd be half that 520? Is that
Yeah.
60.
So it'd be 260?
So
Or
call
would
it-
be-
yeah, call it 10, because it's the
Okay, so
520.
it's supposed to be 10?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
One of those numbers didn't work.
One of those numbers didn't work. I know.
She's got a head for numbers. So.
Yeah.
So the next department is 509. This is the community center. It's for Diane Booth. After 20-some years, she's asking for some help up there. And she describes it, if you look under the tab for 509. She says she's averaged working an additional 400 hours per year for the last 10 years. I said, we continue to provide more services without adding staff. And historically, she said, it used to be at 2 full-time positions here for extension and 1/2 for community center. We were reduced from 80 hours a week to 40 hours a week and trying to do the same or more services with less staff. So that request is not, I don't know what 832 exactly is, hours per week, but it's 832 hours a year without a calculator.
Can't have
Less
my
than
52.
half,
Some-
more than 10.
Something just short of 20, but. And the last request, this is on here, more for information because you'll get the full details next week, but that's a public health nurse. This is adding the 20 hours a week to 1,040 for a year. And both of these positions with the VSO are adding 50% of the health since they shared that. So this would put both of those positions at full health insurance, which also boosts both numbers up a little bit. So the total
The
here,
deal is a public health nurse, because at 20 hours, we have to pay less than we would pay for 15 hours of the VSO.
yeah,
looking
that's
for a deal.
that's longevity, basically.
Yes.
Of the 2 positions, steps. So the total, there's about 200, these are estimates, but about 223,000. So which is, that's about 2.42% of our levy, of our proposed levy, so just gives you an idea of what you're looking at for options there. The second item, second in your packet, are the capital purchase requests. So you're going to see two sides to that page. They're going to look very similar. One says 2019, and the other says 2018. And basically what you'll notice is there isn't a lot of difference overall, so it isn't that there's a lot of increase. Does everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's not a lot of room for making a difference with this unless you're just going to make cuts to what's, most of this is basic operational. So just to go down line by line, the assessor has $2,000 for handheld devices. They're going to start going out in the field. Most of the cost of that program is actually in the IT software, MCIT's management of this, but he does need the handhelds. And then Rena's replacement of workstations, et cetera, this is pretty standard. That's been $75,000 roughly for the last 20 years, somewhere in that range. It's changed a little bit. You can see the replacement schedule. Some of those used to be 4 years, now they're 3 years. I assume that's the industry standard for how long these things last, given the software changes, primarily. If you turn the page, it was almost the same last year. It's about $300 drop, but some of it's different. Now you see her staff request. Last year she was planning on replacing 48 workstations, now it's 71. So that's reflecting the changes going on in the number of mobile devices changing too. So just how to read this too. So you've got all her subtotals over there, and then you've got the total over in the levy cost. But before that, you have another column that is not affected, does not affect the levy. So there's a couple of items that are coming from funds that we accumulate. So next item down is the maintenance. Brian is anticipating a new lawnmower next year for $4,000. Larger item, the sheriff is looking at replacing the armor radios. He's looking at this as a 3-year plan. We bought those radios in 2013, partly from a large federal grant and partly from equipment bonding back in 2012. So they're not all in his department. Some are at fire departments, and they're budgeting likewise in some of the fire departments. So this is search and rescue and the sheriff and et cetera. Search and rescue, you'll see a page in there from the sheriff, but it's basically the assumed breakage. It's pretty typical that they don't know what to plan for, but something that they use out in the field there in search and rescue is going to go down. They're going to have to replace it. This is their standard budget, $10,000. The next one is the E911 dispatch desk work area. Now that's not in the levy because that comes out of E911 funds that we receive every year. The next item down is the tower capital account, and that's not actually an expenditure planned this year. This is the revenue that she's expecting to come in. It could actually be more than that, and that she's really asking to allow that to stay there, to build up in order to replace towers. Bogus is the one that's in dire need very soon, so can help with that. EMS is asking for $10,000 on a levy for the EOC, audiovisual, and other supply requirements. Community Center, Dan Booth is asking for $3,000 for a few new tables, and $7,000 to budget 3 years for compressors again, $21,000 for compressors. So $10,000 total. The YMCA is looking for about $18,000 for primarily, I think it's exercise equipment. All of that was purchased back in 2013. So with the heavy use, this will be 6 years later next year, and you've got more information.
Move your mic a little further away.
Oh,
Your voice is booming.
okay. I'm almost whispering besides, yes. Do you have any more description on that one?
I don't, other than that the contract mentions the equipment list that the county owns, and the county owns the cardio equipment that
Yeah.
has a value of about $75,000, $80,000, and this is representative of replacing about 25% a year. So this would be, this is something we hadn't budgeted, but we needed to budget for. And this would be spent this year, this coming year, on the spin bikes. Those were the pieces of equipment, if you remember, some of them came in as being used instead of new when we opened the YMCA, so.
The next item is a copier, which comes from our copier fund, so it's under grant and reserve column, not under levy. So the total levy request is $196,409. Last year was $181, so it's a $15,000 increase to levy. Although some of our last year that was planned for levy, we actually used some of that bond for the sheriff's mobile data communications. Down below is not general fund, but the building fund, as long as we're at it, and it's on this page. So we have a few items that are build-ups again. And this one may go away. Radio communications, we've been reserving for equipment buildings. Small amount, $3,200, but depending on how much comes in under those cell phone, we may not need to do this in the building fund. Community center, we've been building up reserves for recreation. Now some of that has gone away, but we still have the tennis courts and the, what's the other one? Where they jump and slide. Skate park. Yeah. Sorry. I never used a skate park.
I had a vision of a bike going.
And then we put in here this year, we should be building reserves in the building fund so that we don't, I mean, the idea would not be to have these small line items for $3,200 for equipment buildings and things like that. We would have a larger amount like we do for copier funds, only a large amount for buildings, et cetera. So this is something that's optional, you know, when you're looking at your final numbers, of course, but this is what you'd like to be doing. And the last section there is the highway department, which you actually saw already, but I just put it on here because it is part of the capital expenditure plan.
Madam Chair, if I might suggest, while we have the EDA representatives here, maybe we cut to that.
Yeah.
Because I anticipate that we're going to spend a good amount of time reviewing the general fund budget, and we're just starting with the handouts that Brady has, so.
Okay, thank you so far, Brady. Okay, good morning.
Good morning. Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'd like to start with just kind of a summary of how we're feeling about last year at the EDA, and then this younger man on my right will wax eloquent about the levy request.
Still working under
So in this last year, we renegotiated our contract with UMD for the Small Business Development Center. I think Pat probably had 1,200 billable hours this year working with entrepreneurs, those that wanted to create a business, those that had problems to their existing business, those that had ideas for expansion. So about 1,200 billable hours at no charge to the clients. Second, as you know, we finished the construction of the golf course. We had our grand opening on the 28th of June. It was a spectacular day. Some of you were there. It couldn't have gone any better. We had people from all over the Midwest and a lot of press as a result of that. My hat is off to Heath, who runs the pro shop, and in particular the superintendent that finished a lot of loose ends left over by Mid-American Construction. But that's another story. So the Small Business Development Center, the golf course, the other major thing that we did is we evolved and continued to promote our relationship with One Roof Housing. In this last year, as you know, in Grand Marais, we've completed 4 homes. We had 28 applications for ownership. 4 of those were awarded. We're already working on phase 2. The workforce housing project down in Lutsen has started. We expect to be in there by November 1. The aggregate investment is about $4 million, which the young man to my right says is about $80,000 of incremental real estate taxes. So in summary, particularly on the housing, because that is our #1 priority and I think the #1 issue in the county, we've done quite a bit to start mitigating that issue. We've improved the quality of life for people that are going to move in there, and we've improved the tax base. So we're quite pleased with what we've accomplished and hope that you'd agree with that.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I think you've got in front of you our proposed budget. We incremented this up by 5%. We leverage our budget by grants from IRRB, mostly from IRRB, although there's some other grant monies that come in there. So the total impact that we provide the community is over $3 million, or over $1.5 million, or about $1.5 million. We keep our operations as lean as we can. Staffing, we do a lot with one talented person, in Mary Somnus. We lend her out for some other projects, creative economy work. She's in Puerto Rico right now on Plan B for the tourism folks. I think we're probably paying for a little time, but the tourism group or some of the groups are paying her airfare down there. This is to backfill the foreign workers that we're not getting. So the projects remain for this coming year. Housing, to complete the next phase on the Nordic Drive. We've got the 4 houses in place. There's 3 more in construction. The infrastructure and the road are in. Village North, actually I'm going over, we have a grant application for Bruce Block, who's working on the old site there, calling it Village North. He ran into some water line issues, and we wrote a $85,000 grant for infrastructure for water line there. So we hope that that'll be successful and we get that grant on Thursday. So that's another housing project. He's doing really good work on the kind of the lower end, of really affordable housing that he's working on over there. So we're helping with that. We've participated with Tofty. They've resurrected, looking at seeing what they can do for housing out there with a project that was started. So we've helped with a little funding there as well for initial studies. Otherwise, we sold a couple more lots, so at the business park, so things are picking up there. Anyway, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, very good, thank you. So we will open it up for questions, comments. Commissioner Bershine?
Well, first of all, thanks for a highly successful year that benefited our people and our economy, and so It's gratifying, I think, as a commissioner to see an organization such as yours, when you get some funding to do some things with it that are very productive. And,
Well, thanks for that. It's
and helpful.
my goal is to not get together and meet with a bunch of nice folks every month, but to actually do things. And I think we are doing things, so that's good.
And I think what you're proposing is reasonable. Thanks for shooting for 5%.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dukert?
On the 5%, I've been trying to push this through with my lovely budget committee over here for quite a while. We have some joint agreements like the library, and part of that agreement is if it's not over 5%, we just move forward with it. So, you know, over the last couple of years where we have huge changes at the EDA and coming in and asking for a big change, if we had just had a 5% since we started, we wouldn't have to come in and ask for huge chunks of money to do things, and we'd be able to just move forward. So originally the numbers that came in were a little higher, and I kindly asked them to get us down to 5 and look at having no more than 5 every year and to be able to do what we need to do. I think the biggest success to look at is having Mary on board and the amount of pass-through funds we have. When you look at the top number of what we're putting out into the community, a lot of that is not only the work of us on the EDA, but hugely the work of Mary and reaching out and having the chamber in the building with us and doing all of that stuff together. So 5% seems like a lot, but it's just a little tiny bit on our budget.
Commissioner Deschamps?
That's only like $14,000 in. I got makeup.
Like I said, it's not a lot.
No, it's actually 275 to 289.
Yeah, 14,000 difference. Correct.
Yep. I was thinking we should have asked for the portion of the tax increment that we're actually
Creating?
getting.
Creating.
Don't push it.
Don't push it.
We could start asking too, I guess.
Commissioner Stevenson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also want to thank you for a tremendous, particularly this year, so much came to fruition, but it took many years getting to this point, so
And
of
a lot
hard.
of good work by many people, not just.
Yeah, but particularly skilled work. We wouldn't have gotten here without the high skill that's on the current board. And because you can work a lot of people can work really hard and not get here. So it took a certain amount, a lot of skill. And so I really thank you for your efforts there. I know you get paid a lot to be on the EDA, not
$30.
So the help that you've given the community, volunteer help you've given the community is outstanding. Yes, and this budget seems quite reasonable. And I like your idea of a policy that is like the joint powers, but I don't think we'll go through that here. But I think it might be a little bit more complicated than that because it's not really, you're not running a facility. And so the 5% policy might not make any sense in that regard.
And I hope to reserve the right to come back here if we've got a high need, something big and exciting that we could look at and a bigger ask. But what we're working on now, this will cover what we're thinking about.
Fantastic. So you're working really hard on our number one priority, which is housing.
It is.
And number 2, which is staffing, is a huge priority here. But now, can you just take on daycare somehow?
Well, assisted living is still on our.
Yes.
Cook pot, and we're as time allows, we're making some moves there. It kind of fail with Spectrum, but now as summer winds, the busyness of summer winds now, we pick that back up, and we've got some other people in that area that we can court a little bit.
So when you say daycare and why he says assisted living, is
I
because
understand.
in our broad picture of it, we wanted a facility that had daycare and housing and assisted
a
living
lot.
care. Yeah, it was
So
a
it's
big
nice.
ask.
And actually, with our business development little pot of money, which isn't much there,
Right.
You know, if there was somebody in assisted living, that we're working on, or one of our goals for the next meeting or two is to have a policy for how we help businesses. We haven't really got anything on paper yet, but that would be there's probably some money in here for seed money for things like a daycare. I would hope we would have some.
Fantastic. And I know Pat, even though it's probably not part of her direct mission,
Well, she's working on that.
She's working on
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
lots of community issues. And daycare, I'm sure, is one of them. So I just can't thank you enough. Come a long way. Thanks.
Thank you.
Who bought the lots in the ADA park?
The last one we sold in Escoda, so he's going to move some of his operations there.
The county towing,
Pardon?
the towing company.
The towing company is in, did we sell one more up on that side too? Or maybe
Was
we
Max
just-
last year or this year?
Last year.
Last year.
Last year.
And how many are still available?
Oh, it's plenty, yeah. And we have,
Interested?
we have some inquiries, you know, and we had some discussion about zoning, but that's, it'll take deeper thought and more study.
We had a lively discussion.
Had a lively discussion, yeah.
Some of us are opinionated on the board.
So with the 5% increase, you still continue with your goals of housing and Cedar
Right.
Grove, and maybe a policy on different goals that you want to see for 2019?
Yes.
We actually have a policy committee now.
We've got quite a bit of momentum on the housing side, and we want to keep our foot on the accelerator here.
Well, especially in Tofty, if we can kind of work through that, because the site is set aside.
It
There's
is.
a few things that need to be done, a little bit more infrastructure, I understand, but, and deciding what kind of homes and age groups. I mean, if One Roof would be still interested in that, a multi kind of family development, not just specifically for one group of people.
Yeah, and we're right, at this point, we're not driving the cart on that. We're kind of participating and Dennis is doing a lot of work, Craig is doing a lot of work on that.
I've been meeting with Dennis and Craig, and Craig and Ojard twice, as Craig and Ojard finishes up their recommendation. So I would say in a couple of months, the air will be clearer than it is now.
Okay. Sounds great for the West End and for your goals. Any other comments, questions for this group? I would have to say that the print is awful small here on my particular paper, but I know you wanted to fit it all in one sheet. Okay.
Jeff's got a copy machine that expands it.
You can use my lovely screen here. and
Yes, well,
expand.
yes.
Didgeridoo.
It's big on my screen.
Yeah, I can read his from here. I'll look into that in the future. Okay, without any other questions or comments, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming and
Thank you.
presenting the good news from your group.
Yeah, awesome.
We're going to get more work out of Scott now since he has a flexible schedule.
Mm-hmm, yes.
A minister without portfolio.
All righty, so we will go back to Brady. It's nice to
So just,
good news.
just to note some other changes in the general fund. The YMCA is now part of the general fund rather than a standalone. We've moved it to 01, Department 536, beginning this year. So you won't see it on the summary as a separate line item. We did that, well, A, we didn't know how it was going to be formed originally, the legal, and B, it was important that it be highlighted, but it technically, an accounting function, it's not a special revenue fund, it doesn't provide revenues. So you probably know, so it belongs in the general fund, from an audit standpoint, et cetera. So So that's a big addition to that increase that you'll see overall for the general fund, is that that's just moved up. The other thing is that we're budgeting an additional, in excess of 100,000 over last year, reflecting the actual costs in there. I've got to look back and see if we have to move with those FTEs and that change. I'm not sure what we have budgeted in there. So I got to be sure of that. Just don't remember. So it may be a little bit less. But the actual expenditures right now look to support about 100,000 more than what we budgeted last year, which was 170 up to 280, but it'll be in the general fund now. Other big change is that many of the non-mandated departments, now you're going to see them in public health, about 130,000 that was in the general fund is now in public health, such as the senior center and the summer camp programs with the schools, et cetera. You'll still see in the general fund a few of those non-mandated, so to speak, the historical societies, both Cook County Historical and Tofty. You'll see Historical Society has a request. It's in there right now at 68,000 is their request. Tofty, we just got their request, but haven't entered it and haven't changed it here. I had put $10,000 as a marker from last year. It's a little bit different from that, so there'll be a few minor changes the next time you see the general fund.
You mean Schroeder Historical?
What did I say?
Tofty.
Tofty, Schroeder.
I didn't think we
Sorry.
asked for anything.
Fishing Museum, yeah, no. No, so he sent his request. I had put 10,000 in there just as a placeholder, but it's a little bit different than that. So you'll see different numbers when we, I think Grand Marais Playhouse sent a budget to Jeff. We don't have that entered. And I just got one from the Music Association for 2,000. That's not entered. So those are relatively small changes that you'll see when we reprint and give you updated pages for your books. Other things to note, the healthcare reduction, we expected 10% increase this year, and we got a 1% decrease, so that's now reflected in the budget, and that was about a $95,000 decrease from what we were originally expecting. 190,000 decrease countywide of what we were originally budgeting. The other positive is the state in lieu. That increase is about 122,000 positive for the general fund. And the federal in lieu, we still don't know what it is, so I'm not sure how to budget it. It's just going to sit in the fund balance till we figure it out. So, sit in the general fund balance. If we ever find out, we'll do something with it.
What was that exact amount again?
I was 761 and some odd,
761.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I still believe it's likely our regular payment in lieu, which has been about 135,000 a year with probably some increase. And then the rest is probably the secure rural schools for the last 2 years, which was reported in many places, including AMC, that was going to be, we're going to get reimbursed for last year and this year, and still not know going forward, but that means we should be splitting it up to Highway Department, but until I know that, I'm not going to do it.
Sure.
But that's good for a fund balance, at least in the short term. I think the next page in your book is a summary of the general fund. This is just levy, so it's net of expense and revenues, so you can get an overall of the impact of all the department changes from last year to this year. And one thing to note is the 2018 levy includes that amendment we did last week, so it's got all the payroll amendments. So these percentage increases are they're realistic increases now from one year to the next, since we took care of that. But you can go down and see the larger increases usually line up with those requests for personnel on those departments. And you can see down at the bottom of the first page, the YMCA now in that general fund. And the state in lieu of tax increase is down on the second page under state and federal revenue. And the bottom line there is the levy, $4,499,636, which is about a 12.5% increase, with about 2.42% of that being those personnel increases, and then more than that being the movement of the YMCA to the general fund. That's about 3% of that 12% increase.
I would make, Madam Chair, a comment on the YMCA budget. I think we do have to make some adjustments related to the FT expenditures in there. And we also do need to go get on the agenda and go back and update our contract with the city. The current contract that we have with the city is based on the previous contract that we had with the YMCA, which we updated in the start of 2017. So before the end of the year, we need to get a contract that's at least reflective of the current financial situation, at the same point in time asking for an increase in the commitment of funds from the city to offset the YMCA. So that is something that's on our agenda to get done this fall.
That's great.
Tongue in cheek, the city was kind of saying, well, your relationship changed. I'm not sure why we're making this payment this year. And we said we'll get that contract updated for 18, so that in 19 it's clear, and at the same point in time we'll talk about the amount of that financial support.
And the value that's been added
Mhm.
to the city is pretty substantial.
Yeah. Are there any questions on that? Okay, then
Could I just ask
Yeah.
a question about, could you just repeat the health insurance, what were, it decreased 1%, and we were assuming it would be a 10% increase. What were those amounts again? Just
Well, so the total, we would have been looking at this about $190,000 difference
okay.
between a 10% increase and a 1% decrease.
Okay.
And and that's what we came into this looking at,
Right.
expecting
Right.
something in that neighborhood. So,
So it's about a 190 overall.
but when you look at, right,
Okay.
it's just something to keep in mind too, because the chances of this string of positive news is just not likely to continue. So we've had
Right.
2 really good years in a row.
Thanks, Brady.
Well, if you look at the other entities, government entities, it does, it just goes in patterns. It's up and down, it's up and down. The
Last time we
cities,
had a huge increase was right after the city and the hospital had theirs.
and then they had decreases or stayed the same while we took big jumps. So it's just our turn for positive news for a couple of years.
We're trying to build a sustainable
Yeah.
organization, and we're trying to build back fund balance, so,
So we'll take it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then the last page here is the summary, a snapshot of what we've got right now. So in the general fund, you see that $4,499,636, which is about a 12.5% increase. You saw the highway when they presented. They were able to keep theirs to a 2.53, even with calcium chloride, which is pretty remarkable. Public Health Human Service, they're right now at about 13.2, and as they'll point out next week, 130,000 of that is, if it's approved, but right now, it's in their budget, the non-mandated that were in the general fund, so. Yeah, I don't know if they've made a final recommendation on that yet, but I think that's reflected in their budget right now.
So is that why it's 16.66 rather than the 13.2 that?
I'm looking at a different sheet. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's actually 16.66 now. Yeah, I'm looking at a week ago. So
Wait, I like
they've made some, sorry. No, so that's from a week and a half ago. So 16.66 is their current numbers as of Friday, which includes the 130,000.
Okay.
So their dollar amount request over last year is that 365 minus $130,000.
Right.
The 130,000 just
Yeah.
was moved from the general fund
Yeah.
to the
Got it.
Health and Human Services Fund.
Got it. So this 365 includes that?
It includes the 130.
Apples to apples, yeah.
Mhm.
Right now, the airport, same levy, well, actually, a little bit reduced levy from last year. The building fund, you just looked at that, and part of that is that hope to build up a fund, so we've got that roughly 100,000 in there, which you'll probably remember as we get closer to finalizing. The CIP bonds, those are the bonds we just issued. We were able to help this overall budget because we levied this for this year. We expected to be issuing bonds last year in the fall, so we'd already levied that. And so we're gathering some money right now for the 2019 payments. So this first levy does not need to be that high. It will be back up in the $200,000 range in 2020, but not for 2019.
Okay.
The equipment bonds are still there for 19 and for 20. So they're roughly 337,000, and then they will be done after 2020, but then that's accounted for in our financial management plan. So if you're going to do future projects, you won't just let that disappear and forget about it. So bottom line with all of this is 8.12%, and this is, 8.12 is more than we were hoping for, but as you recall, this is our first blush. In
less than
past
20.
years, yeah, we've been in the 20s for years at our first blush. So this is just the start.
Thanks, Brady.
Any other questions or comments?
So, Madam Chair, out of this first overall look at the general fund and the levy impact for 2019, we've got a budget committee meeting this afternoon. We're going to be reviewing the Highway Department. We've already seen the Highway Department and the law enforcement presentation to the full board. Next week, we're going to see the Health and Human Services overall. So the questions I would ask for this board as we work towards a final levy and budget for 2019 is, if we go back to the first page of the requests for additional staff, the requests related to capital studies. If there are places that you have questions or want more information or want to talk directly to one of the department heads, please let me know so that we can include that in an upcoming meeting and ask those staff to come in and talk about their requests specifically. In a couple of cases, I know that the staff requests are put out there as placeholders, knowing that we might not get everything we're asking for, but we know we have to start talking about that need. We've been doing this with the community center for a number of years, that we know we're going to have to find some help for Diane for operating that facility and the program. We also know that Diane's not going to be there forever, so we have to be doing some thinking about what that looks like, what that transition might look like. Internally, we'd had some conversation about does a staff, an assistant for community center and an assistant for communications, is there some opportunity to use that same person for both of those things? You know, so we're always looking at how do we, Brady adjusted the dollar amount and said that the new staff is roughly 2.42% of the 8.1% in new levy requested. And that's true. It's also 3.15 of an FTE, and it's also representative of 3 additional health insurance contracts total. So those are the primary considerations, because those are the things when we ratchet up, then we have increased the scope of our operation. And we should only do that if we're verifying that the program that they're supporting is a program that we're setting a new baseline for. Those are really tough conversations to have, because I see the merit in every one of these, and I've got one of the requests on here. But we have to look at the long-term sustainability. When we're looking at our financial management plan, it didn't put in any assumptions for a change in the size of the workforce that we had. So one of the things we first looked at in 2017 was looking at a flat organization. So anyway, those are things to consider. I would ask, if anybody has any of these requests that they'd like more information on, we can talk about it today during the meeting, or you can let me know so that we can go ahead and schedule it for an upcoming meeting to have that department head come in and talk specifically about those requests.
The other thing to consider is that these aren't necessarily all or nothing. Sometimes when we've added staff, we've done it mid-year, so we have a half cost for the first year of implementation, because we have to create. Well, we have to create the job description, we have to define the job, we have to advertise and interview and everything, so if we see that there's a need for some of these positions, but we're not ready to take the full boat for 19, but we are for 20. And some of these jobs we're already working at, so it's not realistic to say no to them when we're already forking out the dough.
Just another point of context is our 2018 final levy is $9.24 million, which means that 1% is $92,000.
I already wrote that down.
So it's important to note that if our CIP bond payment in 2020 is going to go up by $100,000, there's the first 1.25% that for 2020 that's already spent, right? We had a 5% increase in health insurance last year. We had a 1% reduction this year. There's no guarantees for next year. And, that's a percentage modification on $2 million worth of expense. So it's, and 2.5% commitment on to the staff in next year, again, would be close to $225,000. So 2020's 4% is already spent. So we have to be very cautious as we're looking at that and understand when we do look at, when we see the Health and Human Services one, we will be talking about how the size of our staff changes the way that we model the reimbursement rates that we get for certain programmings. So we'll have that conversation next week. But when we are looking at support staff to support the program at the community center or to support our communications program, that's part of the central function that we're providing that doesn't have any revenue associated with it. So just to be thoughtful about that, we're doing everything we can to be as sustainable as possible, but with a budget and a levy our size, 5% is not much.
It's
5% is $450,000. It's not.
Well, it's contextual. You can't just go by the percentages there.
Right. So
Yeah,
percentages
you
and
can't compare
dollars and all of those things
to
are.
somebody else's percentage.
No.
We just had this conversation, didn't we?
Yeah. So should we make those decisions now? Like, who do we want to see come in? I'm curious about the the new health,
The
the
technician.
technician. I
That's a-
realize it's.
That's,
pre-
S Health is a denotion that
Okay.
Brady's assumption is that person will take a single health plan.
Oh, got it.
So.
It's not for a.
No, it's
So that number
Okay.
could be, you could add
Right.
10,000 to that if that person came in with a family
Family.
health plan. So the
Got it,
S
got
Health
it.
is an assumption related
Is the
to.
small amount but for this,
Mhm.
and it's a full-time technician.
Yes.
Okay. I haven't read that, the narrative yet, so I can read the narrative. Is it, and decide if I want more information. The HR specialist, I would trust that you all know what's going in. I don't know how we can,
You can tell her to stop working and just leave it on her desk until next week.
no, that's the part I don't understand. And now you can do that.
Again, this is the first blush. This is the numbers everybody
Yeah.
submitted without any refinement whatsoever. At our last MAP meeting, I addressed everybody and said, we're gonna have to tighten the belt in some places, and we're gonna have to tighten our assumptions on, if we're, again, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Do we want to tighten the belt so that we end up so Tim comes to the board and asks, can I buy a new recycling trailer? Or do we want to leave that flexibility in the budgets for the department? Do we want to be specifically authorizing pieces like that at the board level, or do we want those to be built into their operational budgets? And right now, we've scaled the departmental budgets, the general fund budget, back to the point that we're asking for permission to spend $10,000 to replace it, a door. And I would much rather us have a $200,000 program for Brian to be managing, and for us to be presenting a list of things that are going to be getting done with the capital money that we've set aside for the year, and approve that as, as a whole. And obviously, there's still things that come up. But we haven't, even in this request, I wanted everybody to see the number, to see that it's different than the 28% that we've been working with for the last few years. But there's a commitment that's not going to be the number we're going to present you for a preliminary levy in September, and definitely not for a final levy in December. So let people understand that. But there are things that haven't been included in here, which includes planning for capital purchases, planning for building maintenance, the front steps of this building. We've just got caution tape up because the steps are crumbling, and we don't have a budget to even hire somebody to give us a price to fix them right now. And for a $20 million a year organization with $50 million worth of buildings, we really need to build the capacity to be able to take care of things like that as they come up. This is not the year to do it because of the major adjustments and the promises that were made last year. But they do have to be included in future planning.
Kind of like a conversation I had with a citizen who said we were trying to buy a Mercedes on a Pinto budget, and I said, did you see the window that has a sign that says don't open? Did you see the cracked tiles? Did you see the steps on the side? And they were like, okay, never mind. I didn't notice all of that.
You're trying to, yeah.
We're not trying to drive luxury.
You're trying to maintain, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm still relatively new, and I know in organizations that I worked in previously, we have overtime policies. And I would assume that, like in jail or something like that, if you need someone, you go to overtime. Is that, but I don't know if that's clear across all departments. Is there a policy on overtime that at some point you can, and then what impact does that have on budget, if?
That's a great question, and I think we should provide a general summary of that. From my understanding, the greatest impact on overtime and scheduled overtime is in the law enforcement center. A significant portion of the overtime in law enforcement is picked up by grant funding.
Sure.
So it doesn't necessarily have an impact on levy,
Okay.
but I think that we could possibly come up with a summary that shows the impact of that on here. The other places where it impacts us are when there are calls for service outside of the regularly scheduled hours. whether they're in information services or the highway department or public health and human services. When people are called in outside of their regularly scheduled hours, then we have very little option but to have an overtime or a comp time impact. So outside of law enforcement, I don't know that we have a budget for overtime anywhere, a schedule for overtime anywhere. We do have overtime costs. Brady?
Yeah, department by department, there may be a couple that have scheduled. Say, I know that we're using this much, and so they budgeted it. I can't point one out to you, but I've seen it in the past. But
I think my point being that sometimes when you look at these additional staffing, you got to look at, you possibly are maybe, you know, creating a situation where it's not that exact cost, and that, because if there's a need, you would think that maybe to some extent someone's working a budget in order to cover it.
yeah,
And do we have a policy where people say, well, you put in this extra time today, you can maybe go home on Friday and
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so those things, but they're still costs. I mean,
we do have that.
yeah,
It's,
okay. And, you know, I don't want to make a big point of it, but I think it's just something we always have to look at.
Yeah, we have a
Staff
comp time
issues, yeah.
policy where you, the money goes into your comp time balance, and then you can use that. Department heads
Sure.
make that decision,
And that's
whether
good.
you can
That's
have,
good.
take it as time off or paid.
Okay, anything else, Jeff?
No, Madam Chair.
Any other comments on this? We'll have a weekly update from now on, probably.
I would make one more comment, Madam Chair, and that is that after today's budget meeting, I anticipate that just about everything, sometime in the next couple of days, everything you have in your binder will become available on the county website under the budget subheading. So, you guys got to see this summary first, and then it'll be available, and then as updates are available, they'll be updated to the website as well.
Okay, thank you on that. We'll move right into Commissioner concerns, reports, meetings to note, updates. Yes, Commissioner Dukert.
You are all invited to the annual Fly-In Pancake Breakfast, Saturday, September 22nd at the airport, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. And I believe there will be rides available. Yep.
Airplane rides?
Discounted airplane rides. No free rides.
Oh, no free
Discounted.
rides.
Airplane rides, yep. And this is a celebration of the expanded departure building and runway.
So this is a big deal.
That is a big deal.
What's the time?
8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Okay.
And then the next day is the Golf Scramble, North Shore Healthcare Foundation, if any of you would like to participate in that. I know. I gotta throw it in there.
So just anything else? Just a little note here that we are going to start our town hall meetings. There will be a reminder on our WTIP and in the paper, the town hall meetings that we've done for the last couple years in each of the districts all start at 6 p.m. And we start on September 4th, going to the Mid-Trail Fire Hall, September 5th, Birch Grove, September 6th, Hovland Town Hall, and September 10th, two of the districts, Commissioner Bersheim and Severson, will be at the Cook County Community Center. So we will do a little reminder as we go along here because it's coming up fast and it's right after Labor Day. So we will be busy doing hall talks. Anything else? Otherwise, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. We are adjourned. Thank you.